my name is Rachel Derstine, and I am a fiber artist. I make art quilts, as you can see behind me here. But before that, I had a long career of teaching piano and early childhood music. My whole family, we are all musicians. My husband teaches choral music. I have a son-in-law who's a music producer. My daughter is also a pianist. My older daughter is a singer. So music is very much a part of the family. But as the children left home, I started pivoting to doing quilting. My mother-in-law was a very excellent hand quilter by hand. So she taught me a lot, but I soon transferred that to the machine and started making quilts by machine. And then when I started seeing people making art quilts, it just opened up the whole world to me. I felt like um, I kept wanting to learn more and more about how to create these art quilts because I was not so satisfied with working in a grid, just squares and blocks and triangles. They're great, but the fact that I could move beyond that and do landscapes and do abstract quilts and make creations with curvy lines and circles just really got me very excited. The way I got started selling my quilts, I had some open houses during the holidays or in the spring before Mother's Day. I would open up my house and send invitations out to the families that I knew and to maybe board members of the music school where I was teaching. People would come and they would purchase my quilts. And that was a nice low pressure way to get started. And I was actually quite astounded that they wanted to pay money for my quilts at first. But it was very encouraging. So at the time, I was not quilting my quilts on my machine. I would create the quilts, but then I would send them out to someone else to do the quilting on a large machine. And she was a member of Pennsylvania Guild of Craftsmen, and she encouraged me to join that organization. And they do fine craft shows here in Pennsylvania. And so she encouraged me to enter the shows and got me started doing that. And then soon I could afford my own long arm machine. They're called long arm machines. They are very large tables with rollers where you can roll your quilt up, and then the machine will do the stitching. You move the machine rather than the quilt. So it is much easier to do your freehand quilting. It's like drawing, but it's a large machine. If you move faster, then the machine moves faster. If you go slower, the machine goes slower. It is regulated so that you can do all kinds of intricate work. And it's much easier quilting on that than it is on a domestic small machine that you would set on your table. So then my husband and I were both teachers, teaching music. And so here in the United States, we have summers are off. There is no teaching in the summer. Usually. So we would pack all my things and we bought a tent and we would go to the art shows all across the country and sell my work. And you can see images of my booth there. And I did notice that many people came in to purchase my quilts, but also many people came in to ask me questions about how I made my quilts. There were many quilters who were very curious and asked me so many questions about how I do my techniques that I soon realized there was quite a market for teaching. And so that's how I got started teaching. I knew there were many people who were interested. We have what are called quilt guilds, and they are organizations in different regions of the country where people get together and share their ideas about quilting, and they often hire quilt teachers to come in and give lectures and to give classes. And so they hired me, many here on the East Coast. So I got started doing some teaching that way. And that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. And I felt like after all those years of teaching piano, this was just a natural segue. I have a lot of patience and they seem to appreciate that. So then I created an online, I videotaped all my classes and created an online on-demand courses that you can purchase and just take. They're available to you 24/7. You can purchase a course and it's available to you anytime, but you are alone. So you are watching the videos, you're trying it out. I am available to you via email. If you have any questions, you can send me your pictures. If you have a problem, you can send me an email and I will answer it. But I can see when people log in to the website and I see that the enthusiasm is there at the beginning, but sometimes they don't log in as much as they move on. And I think my idea is that it is a lonely experience to do an online class all by yourself. Personally, I'm an introvert, so I love it. And I take many online classes myself, but many people miss the interaction of a in-person class. So then during the pandemic would have been, we went through one almost a year, and then this past January of 2021, I started individualizing the courses. So in other words, I would just take one chapter of a course, one topic, and present it as a live virtual online Zoom class. And have it scheduled for a specific time of day and a specific day. And also, many times the classes are about 6 hours long. So I would have one class be on, say, a Wednesday and for 3 hours. And I would try to schedule it so that would be convenient for West Coast people, convenient for those who are in the UK or Germany or France or wherever, and also Canada. And then I would schedule a second class 1 week later. They would have email access to me in between that time. And also I have a Facebook group. So the Facebook group is Artful Quilting and Sewing. And they could go on there and ask questions. Maybe their classmates could give them some suggestions if they want feedback. So that was extremely successful. I had many, many people sign up for those. And I got the sense that people were extremely relieved to be able to interact with each other. So generally my classes are 15 people, a maximum 20 people. And I encourage the interaction. So we would have people show their work or their progress, and I would give suggestions, but I also solicited other students to give feedback and give their ideas, especially because these are art quilts. And I don't have a formal art degree. I have two music degrees, and I have taken classes from other quilters, but I have not had the art training. So I'm kind of scrambling for the art terminology, and I have taken some art courses online, um, just to help myself out that way. And I discovered that there were students in my classes who were accomplished artists, but they wanted to move from another discipline to expand into fiber art and learning some of the techniques that I offer. So some of the techniques, for example, are um, using non-woven materials. You see the ferns in the background here. Those are not fabric at all. They are cut from a product called Evelon, or you can use some kinds of interfacing, very thin kind of, it almost is like a handmade paper. It's spun, and you can get it at art supply places like dickblick.com. And you can also get it at a book binding website. It's a wonderful product because you can paint it, you can use Inktense pencils on it, you can get it very wet, it absorbs water, it doesn't tear, and then I paint it and stick a fusible onto the back of it. So by fusible, I mean something like this is called Misty Fuse. It's very fine spun webbing. And when you iron that to the back of your material, it melts, but it's very sticky. And then you can run this material through a cutting machine, a die cutting machine. For example, some of the names of cutting machines are Cricut, Cricut, or Silhouette is another one. Camo, I think there's a Cameo is another one. So there are various brands of cutting machines. They all work fine. I always upload my own images into the software, or I will scan leaves and manipulate them a little in Photoshop, and then scan them into the machine, and it will cut out the fabric or the material. And then I can fuse that to the quilt top, the quilt background, and then stitch it down. So it is very exciting to me that that is a possibility, because you can cut very intricate images out, and you can do things that you would not be able to do with fabric very easily. It would be extremely difficult to do that with fabric. I continue to take classes myself on various techniques, because I'm curious. I'm just curious how other people do things, and I want to keep learning more. And I have just that nature about me that I love learning new things. And also another area that I'm expanding in is digital art. So part of learning Photoshop, learning how to manipulate images, I'm signed up to take another class on doing art on the iPad. I'm very excited about that. And that translates into fabric. I have done some of my artwork, I have printed on my printer at home. And I just have a regular Epson printer, but you do need to get some inks that are color fast and will last. So for example, the image, this is my daughter, by the way, who is walking on the Appalachian Trail. Last year, She attempted a fastest known time on the Appalachian Trail. So we went to visit her many times throughout her trek. Most people take months and months to do the Appalachian Trail. It's a trail that runs in the United States eastern mountain ranges from Georgia to Maine. It's over 2,000 miles long, and she wanted to beat the record. She did not beat the record, but she did continue and finish. She has the record for northbound. They have records for southbound, records for northbound, records for men, for women. She did finish. She got what's called shin splints, very painful pain in your shins from running downhill. So the elevation gain and loss is extreme. And if you're running, you know, her first day was 60 some miles for the first day. So she kept going, but she didn't run as much because of the pain. And she started extremely early in the morning with a headlamp on her head so she could see in the dark. She ended late at night. But this quilt is called One Foot in Front of the Other. And she said the thinking about the task that she had ahead was so overwhelming that she didn't want to think about it. It was just easier to think about just putting one foot in front of the other. Many people came out on the trail and helped her, you know, ran with her or walked with her, brought her food, took selfies with her, just chatted with her as she was going. There's a very supportive community of people that live along the trail, and it was very heartwarming. So this image of her was taken, it's a photograph, but I did manipulate it and posterize it a little bit and then printed it out on my home printer. I had to splice it into two parts because she's pretty big, pretty tall on here. And my printer can only print out 8.5 by 11 sheets. So I thread painted her, fused her on there and thread painted her. So that's a little bit of digital art there incorporated into this piece. So And another thing that I do teach that people do seem to want to learn from me is couching. I learned couching from Carol Taylor. And couching is a technique where you take yarn or cording or ribbon and you stitch it down onto the surface of clothing, fabric, quilt, whatever. It's an ancient tradition. You find clothing from China, Nepal, Pakistan, Europe. You can see there are even contemporary companies that use t-shirt material and um, stitch the t-shirt material onto other t-shirt material. You know, they make a cord out of it. It makes it a little more three-dimensional. And you can cut away some parts of the fabric and do reverse applique. It's just a fabulous technique. And Carol Taylor is no longer teaching, so I have kind of taken on the challenge of teaching this to people the way she taught us. Many times I will just teach only the couching and just not use a quilt where there is any piecing. That means you don't have to stitch pieces of fabric together first. Just take one piece of fabric and then learn to do the stitching of the yarn onto that piece of fabric and just spend the day learning how to do that technique. And then there are other courses I can teach on how to incorporate that in different ways. The strata quilt is a pieced quilt using curved piecing. I like to use slightly curvy lines in my quilts, and then I also do couching in curvy lines on my quilts. So the strata quilt would be something you could take, and I teach couching in there a little bit as well. So it would make a little more sense to take the couching class first, artful couching, and then to do the strata quilt. And then, of course, many people want to do the landscape. I have 2 landscape courses. I have the easy landscape quilting for those who have not done a lot of landscape quilting. We talk about design, how to create a horizon, what areas of the quilt need to be darker, what areas need to be lighter, just basic techniques of how to create a landscape. And then an advanced landscape course goes much more in depth and uses some of the techniques that you see in the quilt behind me. That has been fun. I am not traveling anymore with the art shows and the craft shows. I may do that again. I still have my tent. It's in storage, and I may do that again. But right now, I am just marketing my quilts through Facebook and Instagram, Pinterest, and my website. I have a newsletter. People can sign up for the newsletter and get a discount if they sign up for the newsletter. They can get a discount on my quilts at rachelderstinedesigns.com if they wish to do that. I am represented by a gallery near where I live. And one thing about my artwork, it goes through phases. So I do have some series, and one is a window series, and that series is based on, I don't think I mentioned this yet, but I was born in Japan. I was born in Tokyo. My parents were missionaries first in China. My brother was born in China, and then they had to leave there in 1949, and then they moved to Japan in later, a few years later, and I was born there. So I lived in Japan until I was 15. And I think the fact that I lived there and absorbed the, the sort of sensibility of that, the kind of art that I was surrounded with there, has a huge influence on my work. Also, the process of moving to the United States, our family moved when I was 15. I moved from a small English speaking school with other missionary kids and other diplomat embassy kids, um, to a school where it was a public high school, very large. And that was kind of an extreme culture shock. So it was hard to adjust, hard to feel like how to fit into that. And these quilts, my work that is based on the window series is basically it's a metaphor for feeling like I am an introvert. I am safe if I stay by myself, inside with just my familiar people, with my family. I won't make any faux pas, I will be safe inside. So these quilts are designed with windows, and they clearly give you the sense that it is dark and kind of full of shadows in the inside where the viewer is looking from. But there are windows where there is this beautiful landscape, or beautiful, most of them are abstract, so you don't really see a landscape. But there are beautiful fabrics representing gorgeous colors and the sense of beauty beyond the interior space. And so what are the consequences of moving out there? It's obviously something very desirable. So can I be brave and face the consequences? Will I fit in? Can I just go ahead and go out there and try to make friends? Or will I stay in my safe interior space? So that's what those are all about. And they are also based on interior rooms. So in Japan, there is this sense of a flow from the inside of a home to the outside. You often open up the sliding doors to the outside and leave them open, even if it's raining. So you're inside enjoying this peaceful garden out there where it's a little lighter. Washitsu are the names of the Japanese style rooms, and you can see them on my Pinterest boards, at Rachel Derstine Designs. I think I have a lot of them there. And then you will see the relationship between those and my artwork. I also have many landscape quilts. They sell a lot easier than the abstract quilts. So it's hard for me to keep them in stock, but I keep putting them out, and I enjoy making them. This one is very large, you can see. Some of them are quite a bit smaller. And now also I am doing a series. We moved from the suburbs of Philadelphia to right downtown Philadelphia. We live in a building that is 20 stories, and I look out, I see very tall apartment buildings across from me. We're right downtown. We can walk to a beautiful park a few blocks away. We can walk to the art museum. We can walk to many restaurants. I love it down here. I've always wanted to live here, and we were able to fulfill our dream of living here about a year and a half ago. We moved right before the pandemic hit. And now my artwork has changed again. So you can see many architectural. I've made a few of them. I shouldn't say you will see many yet, but there are many to come, I am sure. My husband rides bike early in the morning, and he sends me pictures from his phone. So there's one called Kelly Drive, which he took from the bike path along the Schuylkill River. It's very beautiful. You see arched bridges above him, and there's a Drexel building not far from where we live. I did a quilt about that, and I just finished one recently called Rittenhouse Winter. This quilt is a scene I took with my iPhone from Rittenhouse Square, which is the park I was talking about. You see many tall buildings that are in the foreground, but there are also some very high towers, the Liberty Towers behind that. And it was taken in winter, so there are no leaves on the trees. And right now it looks very different there because the trees have a lot of leaves on them. You can barely see the buildings. But in our Facebook group, I presented a challenge to everyone. I said, let's do a 100-day challenge, quilt challenge. Most quilt challenges are designed so that you do one block a day. So that would be more like a traditional quilt, where each day you create a block, and then in the end you have a quilt that is made of 100 blocks. And I'm not one to do blocks. I can do that, but it doesn't excite me very much. So I just decided to create this architectural landscape, cityscape quilt. And each day I would just do a row of windows or do a partial building or just do some trees. And so you can see that quilt. And I made a little video that is posted on Facebook and Instagram. I documented every single day of making that quilt, and so you can see a fast-paced video of that. And I'm very excited to be here. I think the architectural city quilts are very colorful. They're not realistic at all because the buildings down here are, they're glass or they're gray. But the architecture is exciting to me. And the fact that there are so many cultural activities going on inside these buildings is exciting to me. And when I sit in Rittenhouse Square, I hear so many languages as people walk by. It's just amazing. And I feel very much at home, I think, because of my, multicultural background. That makes me feel at home. If I live in a space where everything is very homogeneous, I am not nearly as comfortable. I get much more anxious about fitting in. I just don't feel comfortable at all. So my quilts are very colorful, and then I also do something called spiral quilting. So the quilting I do on these quilts is just a spiral, layered spirals on top of each other, and those circles give a feeling of vibrancy and energy, and that's the feeling I want to portray. When you're making a work of art, you want to create a feeling. You need to have some sort of a message. The message in this one is one foot in front of the other. You can see that this is a lonely, exhausting experience for her, but she's persevering. So, that's the message there. And there's beauty all around her. And I think you need to pay attention to those things that speak to your heart. What takes you back to your childhood? What takes you back to some feelings you had when you lost yourself in play, or you lost yourself in some activity that you really, really loved when you were a kid? I think those memories are very important. I, as a maybe middle school child, remember being at the beach in Japan and looking over at a cliff and seeing a gnarled old tree. And thinking how beautiful that tree was. I mean, it barely had foliage on it. It was so windblown and windswept by the ocean wind. It was at the beach, but that image stuck with me. And much later, I made a quilt with that, inspired by that image, with a big rocky cliff and a gnarled old pine tree. Beautiful in its own way, but in the setting of the cliff was right there by the sea and the sun was setting. And it's called Nevertheless She Persisted, or And Yet She Persisted. I think I forgot the exact quote when I named it, but um, it's the idea that something can persevere even in a very inhospitable environment. And in spite of that, it can be beautiful, or she can be beautiful. And the difficult experiences make her what she is. So that was very important to me. And at the time it spoke to someone, they very much wanted to purchase it. It went to Houston, which is the mother of all quilt shows in Houston, Texas. I have several landscapes that went there. And and the person who purchased it was kind enough to let me keep it so that I could enter it in that exhibit. And then I sent it to her when it came back to me after that. So that's pretty much what I have uh, for you.
How did your experience as a piano teacher and as a pianist contribute or help you to become quilt teacher and artist?
Oh boy, that is a very interesting question. Um, lyricism, creating beautiful, expressive music uh, is an art form, and it needs to come from within. It needs to come from inside of you, and you need to pay attention to what it's saying. What is the message behind the music? So I think it's very similar. I think, when you look at my abstract work, the lines are very expressive. I do not do very much geometric work. So in terms of squares and rectangles, most of my work has circles in it, has slight curves in it. Um, they are expressive. The seam lines in my piecework is very, it goes somewhere. It's not static. I tend to have work that shows depth, that in some of the abstract works you can see that I use organza. Organza is a very translucent fabric. It has a color. It's not totally transparent, but you can see through it. So it creates the sense that you are standing as a viewer looking at something, but there is something behind it. And there is something behind that. I often layer my multiple windows. So in music, there are layers of things that are happening. When you look at polyphonic music, um, there are layers of voices, or even any instrumental music too. There are layers of things going on in it. When you're learning a piece, you learn to emphasize the melody. You learn to emphasize and make slightly louder the melody line, even though there are many other voices. Maybe in your left hand there are chords or arpeggios, but you need to emphasize the melody, which is often in your top hand. Sometimes it might transfer down to the bass line, and you need to bring that line out. Just like in artwork, you need to have a focal point. You need to have something that makes the viewer look right at one spot. But then you need to also create a sense that there are other things going on. And it's nice to create a sense of mystery that maybe if you look closer, you might even see something else. So that mystery can be in the music, it can be in the artwork. And I think the music very much translate to my teaching as well, because, 35, how many years of teaching music to college kids, to elementary school, high school kids, and some adults too. It takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of, um, you need to learn what are people's learning styles. And if you have a class of 15 or 20 people, they are not all going to have the same learning style. So I have learned a lot from my students. I have, when I started teaching these classes, I'm a visual learner. So I would present pictures and talk about these different pictures. And some other people would say, Rachel, do you have a, a, a instruction sheet, line by line, step by step? Do you have a PDF that you could give us that would show us step by step exactly what we are doing in the class? And I very quickly made a PDF so that I could send it to them all and they could look at it and keep it after class, because I realized not everyone learns the same way. Um, I also teach very much with video. And to me, when I watch a video, I can pretty much catch on right away to what's going on, but not everybody can. Not everybody is a visual learner. So I can repeat that video. And for some people, in a class, I can have some people watch it once, maybe it'll be a 5-minute clip. They can go to their sewing machines and do what I just instructed them, turn off their sound, and I can play that video again for somebody. And they might need to see it 3 times. And they might need to do it wrong and make a mistake first. And that's okay. It's absolutely okay, because that's the way you learn how to do it right. You have to take out those stitches, and I can show you with my example here and just have you try it again. I'm very patient. So I think from my experience with teaching classes of very young children and then teaching piano to all different ages, I developed that sense of meeting people where they are. I am not a super disciplinarian, that you do it my way only. I am not that kind of a teacher, and I never was, even with piano. I would give suggestions that would light a fire under them, or create some excitement in them. And how about if you try this? What do you think of that? Maybe give it a try, see what happens, but try it again. If it doesn't work and you make a mistake, let's try 5 more times and see if you can get it. And then see if you like that. So it's been very helpful to have both worlds, the art world and the piano and music teaching world. So that was an interesting question.
Would you like to talk about the principles that you inherited from your parents and from the community?
That is a little bit difficult topic, but yeah, the basic principles of being a good person, being a positive person. I am not a religious person. I am a spiritual person, but the religion just didn't speak to me. So I think there are still many things that I learned, being kind to other people, uh, being disciplined, being open to other ways of thinking. I'm not so sure that I learned that from my parents, but I learned that from my experience of growing up where I did. So um, it's been interesting. That I little difficult topic. So I just think generally the experience of growing up in another culture, although it presented me with different um, difficult experiences in adjusting somewhat. There are many people who grew up in different cultures and have moved here and have thrived. So, it's not just unique to missionary kids. There are many people who go through that and do just fine. And I think that's probably all I need to say. Yeah, I do have some beginners who take my courses. And I do start out working in a grid and working with rulers. So my first lesson in the course, some people take my courses and they want to go into this right away. And if they have the talent, they can do that. But and they're surprised that I have as my first lesson a table runner, which is just a long piece of fabric that is quilted that has squares on it. And I just think first you need to learn how to do some straight lines. You need to learn how to coordinate some colors, how to sew a 1/4 inch seam, how to press, um, how to layer your quilt, how to do some easy quilting on the small machine. And the time frame is completely up to each person. If they can master that, and most people can master that very quickly, just in a matter of a couple of days. And then we go into a little bit larger quilt that is still on a grid, but then it involves some curvy quilting, and all with a walking foot. So a walking foot is, I can show it to you here. It is a foot a little different from a normal foot for a sewing machine. So this foot um, makes your fabric feed through the machine. The top layer of the quilt and the bottom layer of the quilt feed through at the same time, at the same speed. So you can do quilting with that foot before you master the more difficult task of free motion quilting, where you're really moving your fabric around and doing swirls and feathers and all kinds of fancy intricate things. You can do a lot of wonderful projects before you can ever do that fancy kind of quilting. And maybe you never do want to learn how to do that kind of quilting. There are wonderful, talented artists who do quilts, and they are compelling, beautiful, or very, like I said, compelling quilts, very bold, very abstract, very modern. But the quilting that they do on them, the lines that they stitch on them are completely straight, just one straight line after another, because they don't want to emphasize the quilting. They want to emphasize the design that they created in the quilt. And the stitching is just all straight. That's one possibility. To me, it feels, it's not my style of quilting, but I admire that other people can do that very, very effectively. So it is totally fine. The time frame from if you're a beginner to doing a landscape quilt does not need to be long at all. The way that I teach it, it's very approachable. And I think if you took, excuse me, if you took some of the basic, like the basic course, the online course of artful quilting, just took that and did some of the beginner lessons in there, and then maybe segue to one of the live courses. You probably have a little bit more fun. It's very interesting because the live courses are all things that I teach in the pre-recorded course. It's all in there. But many of my students are ones who purchased the pre-recorded course and they just didn't sit through the whole thing. They wanted to jump right to being in a group and being with other people. And that was much more appealing to them. They could learn better that way. So I found that very interesting. And they learn a lot from each other, I do have to say. And I do learn a lot from them. So they interact. I see them interacting. They have each other's emails if they want them, and they are on Facebook a lot to encourage each other. It's a nice community of encouragement. So
You're doing art quilting, and
it is art quilting.
and a bit of mixed media because you're using other media.
Exactly.
Uh, so how do you think you will evolve as an artist? Because it's becoming a bit of 3D on it.
It could be. It could be. Yeah, the ferns do feel kind of 3D. And then, it's interesting because I do think I'm going to be heading a little bit more towards digital work as well, because that really excites me. Um, and the 3D, I hadn't thought about that as much. But, the way that the sewing machine completely changed quilting. The sewing machine really changed quilting because all quilting used to be done by hand. And then I remember I learned on a treadle machine that you operate with your feet. You've seen those old Singer machines. And I remember when my mother bought an electric sewing machine, we got lessons with it. This lady came to the house and gave us lessons on how to use this machine. And my mother had me take the lessons because she didn't have the patience for it. But and then she had me sew a lot of our clothes. So I had to. I I love to sew clothing. I absolutely adore it, and I sew a lot of my own clothing. But the way that changed quilting for many people, that they could do it so quickly. If you're in the quilting world at all, you see all these advertisements for make a quilt in a day. Well, people don't really make a whole quilt in a day, but you could do much of the piecing in a day. And, they like to do it fast. Um, they like the fact that you can get it done very quickly. But it's still legitimate quilting. It's still recognized as quilting now. People do amazing things with their sewing machines and with the long arm machines. In the same way, I think digital art is going to completely change quilting. Again, I see some quilt artists using art they have created on the iPad and then print it out. They will send it to a company like Spoonflower, have it printed and sent back to them, and then they do the quilting on it. And it's just fascinating to me that a lot of what we painstakingly do with fabric, fusing it, piecing it, could be done on the iPad and very effectively. So I have played around with a little bit of that. I love Photoshop. Um, and there are many other apps on the iPad that I'm eager to learn how to use. So, yeah, I think that's another direction I will be heading. And there are certainly many more architectural. I love the architectural quilts that have been inspired by my new surroundings here. I love living in the city. I grew up in cities. I was born in Tokyo. I lived in Sapporo, Japan, which was the capital of the northern island of Hokkaido. So that's my happy place. That's where I feel at home. And so that's going to influence my work very much.
What other media have you used?
I I don't do that so much. I have done some beading, but that is not my. It takes too long. You know, I am an artist who's trying to sell my work, and when I go to a fine art show or fine craft show, the fine art shows, I'm there with painters. I'm there with mixed media artists who have their canvases up there, and if I'm trying to compete with them, uh, and keep my price point where I feel like it's a fair price point, I can't do a quilt that is going to take months to make. That is not appealing to me. It's not that I want to make it in a day. I mean, it takes a few weeks for me to make a quilt, but um, it that is something I want to keep doing. I have good customers and I want to keep them happy. And so I I use the mixed media that I have talked about already. Also, I guess I didn't talk so much about paint. I do use textile paint more and more a lot. And some of the leaves that you see here, I learned a technique from another artist. So these leaves that you see up here, I learned a technique from another artist. I don't teach this because she's a good teacher. I just send people to her. Um, she uses cheesecloth, and you paint or dye your cheesecloth, and then you create your foliage with that cheesecloth. So I did that technique here on those leaves, on this foliage that you see down here along the path. And so it is very textural. The couching is very textural. It is kind of 3D. The ferns here, I just stitch one row of stitching in the middle of each of those leaves. And so it is a bit three-dimensional. And I just keep wanting to learn. I have taken classes on mono printing, done some work with that, and stencil and paint. I do love to paint and have done some quilts where everything is painted and then quilted. And that's fun too. So yeah. So you can find me many different places, but where I am teaching, the best place to go is to artfulquiltingandsewing.com. So I do have a whole course of sewing as well. So it's artful, ARTFUL, quilting, QUILTING, and AND, sewing, SEWING.com. Artfulquiltingandsewing.com. If you go there, you can get direct access. There's a menu at the top. One is teaching. Just click on teaching. You will see online, on demand courses that you can buy. I would suggest, if you're interested in quilting, just purchase the Artful Quilting course. And I would definitely sign up for the newsletter. You get some free videos, a whole series of about 12 emails. You will get automatic emails, one every day for a while, that give you instruction, free video instruction, just so you can get a taste of what it's like and you can try it out. And then once you have taken that course, any other courses that you take from me are very highly discounted. So that is the basic course. It teaches very beginner material. There are some free videos there, right, that you can access right away. One is how to set up your sewing machine, how to thread it, how to take care of it and maintain it. One is how to make a facing. So in other words, how to create, I don't do bindings on my quilts. I do a facing so that the design goes right to the edge and it's uninterrupted. So that is a free video. You can learn how to do that. If you want to see my quilts, you go to a different website, RachelDerstineDesigns.com. So Rachel, Derstine is Derstine, designs.com. And that also has a newsletter if you want to hear about new quilts that I've come up with and want to see them. You can sign up for that as well. I'm on Instagram, so I have the 2 accounts on Instagram. So Derstine Designs and Artful Quilt Sew. Artful Quilt Sew for Instagram. Same thing for Facebook. So Facebook, Rachel Derstine Designs and Artful Quilting and Sewing. And then the Facebook group is Artful Quilting and Sewing group, Facebook group. Pinterest, same thing. I have 2 accounts, Rachel Derstine Designs and Artful Quilting and Sewing. So there are many links to blog posts on Pinterest, and I have blogs on both of those websites. So I would encourage you to join the Facebook group, and that Facebook group has all levels in it. There are people posting extremely simple quilts, very, very simple, like flower quilts. And then there are people who are doing very advanced work. And it's just a wonderful group because everyone is very encouraging. I have very strict rules about being kind, being supportive, never saying anything mean to anybody. You will get bumped off if you try to do anything like that. So it's a safe place. So I just would like to encourage everyone who is at all interested to give it a try. And what I find, one thing I want to say, most people have fear of doing it wrong or making mistakes. And they think that's going to be the end of the world. Maybe they have their mother's voice in their head saying, no, 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 that's wrong, or you're never going to get it right. Or some awful teacher's voice, maybe, who used to say that kind of thing to them. So you just need to ignore that voice. And I make mistakes all the time. That's the best way that I learn. I tend to not be terribly methodical, but I like to try new things. And if I make a mistake, you can always undo it. Most always, not every single time, but you can usually fix it somehow. And we have great discussions in the group about how to fix things. There are people willing to give advice if you get stuck. So my big thing is to be encouraging, is to give everyone a chance and encourage you to try it out and to have fun. You got to have fun. That's the whole point. That's why we're doing this. Okay?